Cool, welcome to the Knowledge Drop straight out of IBE reporting. This is Focus from the Flowmo crew, bbodojo.com, and we have an amazing guest today who is Mary
Fogarty.
There you go, representing Canada. And here we go, a Dojo alumni as well.
Yes.
From the teacher's education and a very inspirational person who is deep into judging, but also a lot of different things, which is publishing articles and doing research, kind of like a academic approach into the dance as well. So we're going to discuss that slightly today. And of course, there's a big thing that just came out, boom, which is the Oxford Handbook of Hip Hop Dance Studies. So this collectible right here is a heavy piece of information and knowledge that's going to stay here for a long time after we're gone. After most of the civilization is destructed, you can find a dusty Oxford Handbook of Hip Hop Dance Studies somewhere in the ruins of civilization.
That's the dream.
This is going to stay here forever. Amazing.
As the floods come.
Wow,
we'll
I'm actually holding this in my hands for the first time over here, and it's impressive. Wow, first of all, congrats.
Thank you.
Let's dive right into it.
Okay.
Tell me
I'll
about
tell
the
you
process.
a little bit about, well, the book first is 33 contributors, if you include the artist that did the cover, Mary 139. So that's 33 people contributed to the book in writing our different chapters for us. And what else can I say? There's practitioners, serious dance scholars of hip hop, and practitioner scholars, because that's a new group of people coming through that have a background in breaking or other hip hop dance styles and are now doing academic work and scholarship and research in that world as well. So there's everything. There's 5 sections of the book that are organized around different things. So the first section gives you a little bit of background into some personal stories. So Ken Swift has a chapter for us talking about, it's beautiful, the book opens and he says, in 1978, when I first saw this dance. So he starts you there and takes you through the names of moves, different vocabulary, and what it meant philosophically, the aesthetics, everything he wants to talk about. So he does a chapter, Storm's in that first section alongside some researchers, one researcher, Vanessa Lakewood, who worked with Martha Cooper's personal archive and was able to find through studying pictures some of the dancers that no one had spoken to, but pictures we've all seen. She went and was able to talk to at least one of the dancers that was in the photos that no one had spoken to yet. And Iman Selderdin is there from the Mop Tops in the 90s. So it's more than just breaking. There's other dance styles represented as well. We've got Scramble Lock, talking about locking and archives. So there's 5 different sections. A lot of really important thinkers, I think, in the breaking community are represented. Sarouj Abrahamian, known as B-Boy Midas from Style Elements crew, Originality Stands Alone, talks about the globalization and how breaking came to Armenia, which is a beautiful chapter. Mary Park talks about the oral histories of Honey Rockwell and Rockefeller, and talks about what it was like to be a B-girls coming up in the 90s. Helen Sabard interviews, I think, at least 30 B-girls from around the world, talking about their experiences and thinking what it means that we call it B-boying or B-girling and what language does for the dance. So there's a lot of people represented in those pages.
We're going to get back to this book, but first of all, can you guide the people who doesn't know your background about what led to actually working on the Oxford Handbook of Hip Hop Dance Studies? Like, you have a bunch of publications from the past and a lot of things. So what was the pathway to actually get to this point?
Just briefly, I started as a B-girl first, and I'd gone to New York for Rocksteady reunion. I actually just caught up with some people at IB that I hadn't seen for 22 years from a Rocksteady reunion, so that was cool. I'd been dancing, like practicing locally. There were really inspiring people around Toronto, like my favorite, Migas from the Boogie Brats, was so inspiring to watch. The local crew where I'm from, the Albino Zebras, have really inspiring dancers too. So I was breaking and exploring the dance and always kind of had that mentality of I wanted to videotape and felt like I was watching the art of my time. So for me, I was kind of a novice B-girl. I did it really for fun. And when I met Ken Swift, learning about just the musical aspect of it, for me, just as, just someone who loves to dance, it meant so much to really start to develop a deeper knowledge of the dance. But I went through a kind of bad injury. I was kind of teaching because I wanted more B-girls in the scene. I was the only one in my city, so I started, I think, teaching a lot more, but maybe not having an understanding of injuries and that kind of thing, which the book goes into, thinking about injuries and how to prevent them. But I got kind of badly injured and thought, when I go to the library in university, there's no books on breaking. Maybe there's a few, at that time there were a few books on hip hop dance in the library, but in passing, maybe they'd mention Crazy Legs, Rocksteady Crew, but that, there wasn't very much to draw on. So I thought, well, I'm injured, but I want to stay involved in the scene. So that led to me doing my master's on breaking, my PhD in a music department on breaking, where I went to Scotland and got down with the Flying Jalapenos and did shows with them, and spent some time in Berlin battling with Tatsumaki-san at Weeby Girls and doing some more nerding out about the history of Europe.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to Storm. I think I traveled to Erfurt to connect with them. So I was kind of connecting with all of these people over time, which led to, I think, it's over 10 years ago now, I was spending time in New York City, again, learning from Ken Swift and working on a project to understand and go deeper into the history of New York. And my co-editor for the book, Imani Kai Johnson, she was living in New York as well at the time. And I remember we were walking through the streets and saying, you know what, we'd love to create something that we wish we could have had when we were going through that academic process, that felt like it was by people that knew what they were talking about and valued and loved the dance. So we kind of had that idea. And then someone reached out to me who had seen a chapter I wrote for the Oxford Handbook of Dance in the Popular Screen. And she asked me some questions about hip hop. I thought, and she was a ballet scholar, Jennifer Fisher. And I thought, why is she asking, what's she up to? And she got back to me, I don't know if it was a few months later, saying, I've pitched this Oxford Handbook to the editors at Oxford University Press, and they've agreed. And can you edit this thing? I pitched you as the editor, and would you?
Without asking you?
Yeah.
Oh my, okay.
Yeah, but then she said, and they want you to do a proposal, and I thought, well, this matches with what Imani and I were already talking about doing. And of course, I'd never edited anything, so you have to understand, for me, this is a learning curve. This book took 10 years. Going from, just that initial inspiration, when we wrote down all the names of people we were going to ask, it felt like there were fewer people at that time, 10 years ago, writing about it. But I remembered Ken Swift had written a really cool, 3-page thing on the floor and how to use different surfaces. So I was thinking about people in the scene that had already written things that we could kind of approach. So that became the beginning of it. So we made a list of all of our favorite hip hop dance, anyone who was serious about the dance, anyone that we knew in the academy that was the kind of person you'd meet at a jam. So Emery Pachur, who writes about notes from the side of the cipher, talking about being a DJ in the scene and thinking about how important music is in your education as a b-boy. I met him at an event in Philly. So a lot of people that are scholars, but I met them at events in the scene.
Yeah.
Joe Schloss similarly met at an event. So
awesome. Joe Schloss, the author of Foundation, right?
Joe Schloss did Foundation, and for this book, I asked him to do the afterword, which is, in an academic book, he actually got to read all the chapters years ago in their draft forms before it came out, to make sense of it. Just to go, I've read all the things, here's my reflections on the book. Conclusions.
As it says, exactly.
Yeah, so he goes through and says, okay, here's these kind of themes that are coming out. And he says, okay, this is the beginning, so how can we move this? Now that we have this foundation, we're building, how can everyone build from what we see here to really start to reflect on where we want to go as a field if we are going into the, into the classroom.
Yeah.
But also, I really feel any hip hop head, anyone who loves the dance, when you pick up this book and you flip through the pages and see all the names of people and the index where you scroll through and you're like, where's Alien S? This page number, and you can kind of see where people are referenced.
Amazing.
Yeah, I feel like the people would, it's the kind of book you'd want to read even if you're not someone who typically reads, because it's about something that we love And it's kind of like, it sounds like a cipher discussion. It sounds like a panel. You know, it sounds like people from the community talking about the issues that we already talk about in the scene.
Yeah, and seems like the academic research of hip hop is turning into a movement. Been following this. I think every country have their own people on that trip, and I guess it's a balance when two like worlds meet.
Yeah.
And where do you like find that golden middle road of keeping things very academic, where people in the scene doesn't really understand what's going down, or keeping it straight street and hip hop, where the academic world doesn't really have a clue? Did you find that balance, first of all?
Yeah, I think because I was one of the earlier scholars, and obviously there were people that wrote a little bit in the 80s, the late 80s, you know, but those people weren't around. So I think at the time when I started, there really wasn't, like Joe's book wasn't out yet, this kind of thing. Halifu Osamari's work, I think maybe one or two articles of each of them had been out, but not their books. So for me, the journey was a little bit more swinging to the academic side, partly because I was injured, and even when I was dancing over the years, I was more of a novice. You know, I really just dancing for fun and not training seriously for a lot of years. So for me, I swing more that way, and I thought my goal is to open the door so people don't have to kind of swing as far as I did to the academic side and can keep it more holistic. But for me, my dream was, you know, to do this and then get a job, which I have, you know, a job at a university, I'm a professor. And now I just want to make art because I think I swung so far into the book side that now I'm thinking, for me, it's, you know what I mean? It's that all or nothing, and focus all my attention on this for 10 years. Now I can focus on being creative with my students for 10 years. But for other people, like even, you know, I think during the pandemic, which is the only way this book got done, because I had more time to work for like 8 hours a day for 8 months, finishing up the book. But I think Storm had shared his schedule, and it was kind of like write for an hour, stretch for 15 minutes, write some more. So he's got a bit more of a more discipline and structure about keeping that holistic balance. And I think what hip hop can offer the Academy is thinking more about that balance, thinking more about how we can bring questions of mental health into spaces, how we can really support people in their journey, how we can talk about anti-Black racism in institutions and decolonizing institutions, and also all the things that hip hop dance can bring to you, and asking those questions. How do we support you as a whole person spiritually, in your journey in life, physically in your, you know, your practice and your training, and then the intellectual side of it. But I really hope, because when I got into hip hop culture, everyone that inspired me was really eclectic and really intellectual. Actually, that's why I got into hip hop.
Okay.
Because you know, I could read books, and there were always people in hip hop scenes that wanted to talk about ideas. So that's the hip hop scene that I kind of came up in. So I feel like, yeah, it's when do we start using language that's alienating? That gets, you know, those are kinds of questions. Or, yeah, how do you keep a balance? How do you keep a balance? Because you're kind of doing.
How do I
you're
keep
teaching,
a balance?
you're doing. You know, I think everyone's trying to find that balance as
I
you get
try
older.
not to think about it. I just do me, whatever feels right.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and whoever comes. Whoever follows, then follows. Like if it's not for them, it's not for them. It's fine.
Yeah.
You can't do something that's for everybody. So.
Yeah. I think you were one of the few people that was talking to me when I was finishing this project. We had a Zoom call, and I was thinking, a lot of it was hearing all these different voices and perspectives in my head, because you know, you get to know a bunch of people. Think, how's this person going to think about it? And part of the process as an editor was thinking, is there something in this for everyone? And accepting that maybe not the whole book is for you. Maybe some of the stuff's, you know, a bit too far the academic way, or, you know, whichever direction you're kind of going. But I really feel anyone in the scene can find their chapter to start with. There's something in here for everyone, because there are so many different points of view. We don't all share the same points of view. There's lots of conversations about it.
Nearly 600 pages, so
yeah.
a little sum for everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I forgot to mention Dr. Mary in the introduction. So.
Oh, it's okay. I tell my students, you know, call me Mary unless you want an extension on an assignment or something that's like Professor Mary Fogarty, you know, and I'll feel good and think about it that way.
Can you tell me about the process of putting this all together? You said it was a lot of years, but was there any challenges or or like epitomes, or like what was the process like? Must have been a journey.
Yeah, I think the fact that neither me or my co-editor had done a huge undertaking of editing before was a huge learning curve for us, and I learned a lot about that process of working with people along the way. For me, this process was more unique than if I had just worked with professors, because it usually started from conversations and me kind of directing people and curating a little bit. Hey, like, for example, Why Not had done the documentary Make the Letters Dance, and he was doing his MFA at the time. So I had gone to Arizona, we'd had conversations about it, and he was working on his MFA where he had to write up something for that, but I also really wanted something in our anthology about writing and how it inspires dance, and the connection between writing and visual arts with the dance. So I kind of, in some ways, it was kind of a navigation process, right? Of here's what you're working on, here's what I think our handbook needs at this time. Can we start to work on it? So that chapter really started as a conversation, and because I happened to be going through Arizona a couple times, I really felt like it was different, because I was knocking on his door saying, okay, let's work on it while I'm here, while you've got a minute, people that have really busy schedules. So some of the chapters were more hands-on, and in that sense, more similar to how I think hip-hop conversations happen,
Yeah.
Started off that way. Other ones, like there's a chapter on neuroscience where we actually scanned Ken Swift's brain while he was listening to music, because we're just thinking all the different directions you can take research in the academy. So that was a trip, and that was because he had been coming to York University, where I teach, to do workshops and classes with my students. And so we said, can we put you in an MRI scanner? And he said, sure. So we brought him over there, and they played different music and started to do work like that. So for me, it's every single chapter has a story. Every single chapter has kind of a hands-on approach. I'm just trying to think if there's any other kind of funny anecdotal
parts. Let's go deeper
into
into the MRI of the goat. Okay. What did you find? Any findings over there?
Yeah, so they found...
and did you have a comparison to any...
So they compared... I mean, it's smaller than a typical science study would want, because you'd want a kind of bigger data sample. But because he's a novelty...
There's only one Ken Swift. So.
There's only one Ken Swift. So, so they the people that I was working with compared him to a ballet dancer that they had worked with, who was around the same age, a male as well, and him listening to music. And I had my own questions from neuroscience, because I'd done a little bit of dabbling with it during my PhD. So I had kind of a set of questions, and they had a set of questions. But what we discovered was completely different, which is, so when Ken is dancing to unfamiliar music, so they had him dance to music he loves and visualize, so you're in the scanner and you visualize the moves that you're going to do. And then they had him dancing to music he hadn't heard before. So what they found is when Ken Swift is dancing to unfamiliar music, his auditory cortex lights up a lot, which means that, if you can believe it, Ken Swift really listens to the music for inspiration for his movement. Yeah. That's his go-to when he's getting into kind of the visualization. So neuroscience is kind of it's a primitive science. It's just starting out, and it's visual data, right? They're just looking at a brain and what lights up. But it kind of confirms what you would suspect, which is just obviously he's really looking at the music for inspiration.
We've got scientific proof now.
We've got the pictures of his brain to prove it.
If you are watching the video, they're right here. And if you're not, you need to get the book for yourself. All right.
And I think, a lot of people in dance scholarship say that neuroscience is usually just confirming what we've always known. So there was a lot of work maybe 15 years ago about how when you are watching someone do something that you can do, your mirror neurons light up, so you're really relating to what you're seeing. So dancers are like, we already know that. And that's kind of also, I think, a big takeaway from the book, that somatic knowledge, experience knowledge, lived experience of the dance matters the most. So people like Storm are really reiterating that in his chapter. He's like, you can read all you want, you can theorize it all you want, but this is something where embodied knowledge has got the most kind of powerful takeaways, right, in your journey. For me, the embodied knowledge also is editing, sitting at it, learning a different kind of way of navigating the scene. You know, it feels like even promoting the book, we went to Newcastle Just Jam and Sadler's Wells and all of these different B-Boy Summit. And even though for some of the venues it's kind of odd to say, hey everyone, there's a book. How do you promote books in the culture? You know, we've had people write books, Storm, Alien S, other people, but this is a different, you know, it's a different kind of avenue. So
you kind of have to figure it out yourself.
We're kind of figuring it out as we go, because it seems really supportive of people making that kind of effort, but we're all like,
Wait a minute, how do you do it?
How do you do it? And so I feel like luckily people in the scene have had really nice ways of, like you, of approaching it and thinking about how to value it and how to ask questions and be critical too, right? Of, is this the direction we want to go? If not, it gives you at least something to battle. You know, I really wanted to inspire debates and kind of keep us all growing
and that means that a lot of people have to go through it first in order to have those talks. The stamp of Oxford is a big stamp of approval over here. How was that journey as far as not just writing a book, but writing the Oxford Handbook of Hip Hop Dance Studies? Was that like a struggle or an easy way, and how do you feel about it?
I think on the first, if you look at the first page of the introduction, I kind of say, you know, something about irrespective of institutional approval. Hip hop is a space that's already doing this intellectual work. You know, it doesn't need the approval of Oxford. So I really wanted to set that up from the beginning, that even though it is a legitimation project, you wouldn't argue it isn't, right? To say, hey, we're in the academy now, and here's Oxford to prove it. And there is that legitimizing thing. We don't need that for this thing to exist. So I really wanted to make that clear on the first page. That's kind of what I was working through. But it is a really risk-taking anthology because it's not a conventional academic work, because of practitioner voices, because of the way we really wanted it to be emerging people coming up that are practitioner scholars, rather than kind of going to, you know, who's already been writing for 20 years. So kind of going to senior scholars, which a typical Oxford Handbook might do. So we took a lot of risks with it, and I feel like they didn't feel like risks to us. I think Joe Schloss put it best when he's like, I can't imagine me and my co-editor doing it any other way. There's no other way I would have approached it. And I think when I got to the end of the project, I thought, I would have done it all differently if I could do it again. But I'm so glad I did it anyway, you know, because I don't think I would have known how to do it differently if I hadn't done it this way. But when I pick up this book, I'm so proud of everyone that got involved in what we actually are doing. If that makes sense. But yeah, in terms of legitimation, I mean, I can remember getting invited to Cornell University to give a talk, and I was more, I was actually training more to get ready to dance because I knew that there'd be B-boys there. So I think it's still tried and true that I really hope that the people in the hip hop dance community value this. That's my priority. And also for the institution, dance studies is hungry for this. They needed texts on hip hop dance. It's, as you probably everyone knows, is more and more dance departments are shifting away from modern and ballet curriculum to thinking how can they include hip hop. And some of that process means you might have to write a paper, which means you might need some sources to draw on. So this is kind of much needed in that kind of setting as well. So I guess that's the legitimation process of working with Oxford. And the other thing you can imagine is probably the hardest thing was working with the copy editors because of the slang, because of certain choices we made in the handbook for language that wouldn't be how, you know, they would want to correct and change things. And so that was probably one of the biggest struggles. And I remember, I think I say in the intro, my chapter's about why Ken Swift and Frosty Freeze are so damn fresh. And they said, can we change it to how they are so interestingly, you know, they had a different thing, and it was right at the end of the project. And I mailed my co-editor and said, I can't.
No way.
Deal with one other thing, but you know, I was really, at that point, had done so much of that work that I was getting a bit frustrated. So she said, let me take care of it. She said, it has to be so damn fresh.
So damn fresh is going to stay, that's for sure.
It just has to stay. We have to give it at least, that.
Perfect. And now when this is done, what's next for you?
Someone who's not in this book, who's an amazing scholar, Juste Debout, who did his PhD on breaking in Asia. So we're working on a double issue, which I tried to include a lot of the new and up and coming and amazing scholars in the field that aren't included in this. Because part of my feeling too, when you go to grad school, and so for example, me finishing on my PhD and then seeing Joe's book come out, you feel like, oh, someone else put out a book, but obviously we all have something to contribute and a way to do it. So I wanted everyone, now all the people coming up in the field, not to feel like they got left out of this. So I immediately went into that project, and just to make sure we got all those new people and we're showing that we value everyone that's kind of, I want to support everyone that's, anyone that wants to do work in the academy, they all know they can call me anytime, and I'm 100% supportive of whatever project. So we're doing that on Breaking the Olympics, which you can imagine is being an interesting research project. So that one, that's what I'm finishing. That's hopefully we'll finish that this summer, and it's going to come out this year.
Once you get going, you can't stop.
Once we get going. And we have a really cool online speaker series that has a lot of people talking about it. So we've got Rockefeller writes a really important piece for that. Lots of different scholars are kind of contributing to that one. And I'm trying to think if I feel like I always have a million projects in the work. The other thing is I want to get back into dancing and training and getting into the kind of spiritual side for me, looking more into the history of Afro-diasporic dance styles in America, because I want to have a richer knowledge of even before hip-hop going back and thinking about the histories of vaudeville and minstrelsy and how American dance has worked. So I think for me, I want to do a lot more reading for my own consciousness and political activism and social justice themes. And the other thing I really want to do, so you can let me know if you're interested, I'd really love to organize a conference around hip-hop dance education, where we talk about hip-hop coming into the university setting and get everyone together and start to think about that bridge and what it would look like so that everyone feels supported if their university calls them or they want to work in the university, that we start to kind of get the kind of materials together so we're not all trying to figure out things or do it the same way we've always done it, but actually all build our skills to think about how to meet every single learner at a different level, like if they're visual or, how we can do the best teaching possible as we bring it in and keep it the most, not necessarily traditional, but the most kind of advanced thinking about how to approach that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
There's a lot to do, only 24 hours in a day. We've got to stay in touch about that. I went to Cornell a couple of times to work with them.
Yeah.
And their collection is simply amazing, out of this world. And who knows where this whole thing is going to lead. So I wish you best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much for inviting me to.
Where do the people who want the Oxford Handbook of Hip Hop Dance Studies, where can they get it?
So if you go to the Oxford University Press website, you can look it up and use a discount code for your people of AAFLYG6. So AAFLYG6. And that gives you a 30% discount, I think. What's that?
All capital letters?
All capital letters. And that'll give you a discount to reduce the price.
Wow.
Yeah, or, I think it's on Amazon. It depends what country you're in, because I was just talking to someone at IBE who said, I can't get it in my country. So I guess they can also reach out to me and we can figure out a way to kind of order it for people if they're interested. And if you're like, that book is really expensive, and although it's the most beautiful book I've ever seen, I can't afford it right now, fine. You can also ask your local, if you're in university, you could ask the university librarian, because it's Oxford University Press.
That's right.
There's a good chance they can at least get a digital copy with PDFs of all the chapters. And also your public library or anywhere else, just to say, could you get this resource either in a digital or, that's what I do. I'm just saying you can actually tell your library what kind of books you want.
Exactly.
So people can also do it that way.
Amazing.
To check it out.
Respect. Keep doing the important work. Just getting started, I feel, so there's a lot more coming.
Yeah, and next up, Focus says I should be doing No, I say I should be doing a judges showcase training. So if people want to learn from me how to do the kind of judges showcase that gets you noticed, well,
That's what's
what's
up.
up. That's what we're going to do
Speaking from
next.
experience.
All right.
Oh, good. Day 3 IBE. We're about to enjoy the battles. We got the last day to go. And since you are tuning in over there, head out to bbodojo.com and sign up for my free footwork workshop. Thank you, Mary.
There it is.
Stay tuned. Get that book.